Hello, everybody. It is Monday, June 21st, 10:34 a.m. on the Pacific Coast. This is the community work stream of the Inclusive Naming Initiative. I am Celeste Horgan. I will be the more or less host, but this is a pretty free-form meeting for those who are new. I will link the agenda in the chat. And if you do not have access to edit this agenda, join both of the mailing lists listed in the quick links, and you should get access to that. So from what I can see, the agenda is somewhat short today. Do we want to dive right in then? Okay.
Yeah.
Hi.
I think so. I wanted to also cover, sorry I didn't type it, but the call for use cases, and also to ask whether folks needed a template, either for use cases or user stories. I'm not that fussy, but if it would help, we could add templates for folks to, to use, if that would be useful.
Yeah, that was actually something that I put down on the agenda as well, around
Thank you.
documenting use cases. So, I mean, let's start with the use case half of it. So for everybody else involved, we have two items of discussion that I can think of. One is machine readable configs for our recommendations / the DCI lint pull request that has been sitting in inclusive naming website. And the other is documenting use cases. So we had a good discussion around use cases in our last meeting. Kartik has kind of described one of the use cases very, very nicely. And he's done it in what I think can be easily mapped to a user story. My real question is, does somebody want to spearhead talking to people and writing these down?
So I guess the question is, do we want to have people interview others, or do we just create a template and let people write their own stories?
Yeah, I think we create a template and we solicit feedback.
That's kind of where I was leaning.
Yeah.
Okay. So I can put a draft out there. I had collected a couple, GitHub use case and user stories, because I think we might have people who are more comfortable with one or the other. So I figured we would give them the option for both. The more developer types of members would want to use probably the use case. User story might be for the more designer type. And that way people have something they can work with, and then they can, pop it out there, and then I think we'd need somebody to help to consolidate them maybe into one doc. Yeah. But Jason and I can monitor that. Should we just have them respond to the issue we created?
I think that's a start, given Karthik has kind of kicked that off.
Okay. All right. And I think that was under issue number 71, I think it was, that I posted at your request, Stephen.
62? Or we're talking about for machine readable, or?
No, the use cases for how people would want to use tooling.
Gotcha.
It's kind of both. I think
it's related. Yeah.
It's related. I think Dale's is probably the cleaner of the two issues. So that is issue 71.
Okay.
So what I'm gonna say is, let's come up with that template. And then let's go to the mailing list and ask people to say, please give us your use cases given thing X.
Okay. So do you want me to just post the examples of the templates for consideration as a response to the issue. And then we give them the link to the issue, so it's all in one place. That's probably the cleanest way to do it, right?
Yeah, I think that sounds simplest.
Okay.
That sounds good. Can you, when you are done with the template, can you either DM or like at me on Slack so that I can take a look? And I will add the blue bracket template as like the first example. Because I find when you give people templates, they don't necessarily know what to do with them until you like give them a filled out example that they can kind of copy.
Okay. All right. Okay. And I'm not reinventing the wheel here. I'm using actual
totally.
standard templates in Git.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I could actually upload them to you now. I didn't want to make, do the markdown of them yet, but I can just put it into the Slack channel.
Yeah.
So why don't I do that? Okay.
I mean,
That's
we
good.
could, if you have something that is close to a markdown template or something that can be converted to a markdown template, then I would say that maybe the right way to do this review is as a pull request. We just add it as a template and then.
Okay. All right. Why don't I do that?
Okay.
Okay.
Which kind of brings us to the other thing that I had on the agenda. Machine readable configs, the DC Island pull request. Where we left this discussion last week was we think this should be in its own repository, or like things of this nature should be in their own repository.
So we also discussed so now we have at least two issues to look at that are somewhat solving the problem, right? But what we discussed is like, does someone want the language recommendations or do they want the template, right? Like if we create if they're using their own tool, right? And they've got, so you asked two questions on Slack before we hopped in. One was, should we create a new repo for specs? And two, do we support multiple specs versus our own format? I think that we don't have our own format until we have a tool or we have something that would consume the format. And do we need to, again, it goes back to like what people want. Do they want the recommendations? I think right now they want recommendations as opposed to a link to a spec. If they're using a tool that exists elsewhere, then they kind of already have the spec for the tool. So we don't need to write a spec until we prove that we want unification across multiple tools.
Okay. Okay. So I think that is a, yeah, I think you're saying don't over-engineer this until it's time.
Yeah.
But that sort of drives me back to the root question of the DC Island pull request, which has been sitting forever and ever at this point.
So we were moving towards a decision last meeting, I think. And I think the decision we landed on was we wanted to close it.
Yep.
We wanted to close it. And the reason we wanted to close it is what we're talking about right now, is that I don't think that what people are looking for, they're looking for the fully loaded, like this is the INI set of recommendations that works for this tool.
Okay, sorry, you've lost me a little bit. So again, please.
So we're kind of like talking about two separate problems last time. One was I have a tool that I'm currently using and I want it to be able to scan for, for non-compliant or non-inclusive language, right? And then the other part is what goes into that tool, right? Is it the recommendations or is it the spec? Like, are we providing a spec that includes the recommendations? If we're including the recommendations, then we have to canonicalize recommendations, and that is language, not us.
Mhm.
If we're providing a spec for, like, if we decide to provide a spec, are we providing a spec for all tools?
I mean, yeah, I guess it comes back to the idea of use cases in that case.
Right.
Okay.
Well, the pull request was like bringing their own spec, but it was like, I want to be able to point to like an official list. I mean, so we could come to say, okay, tools bring their own spec, and then, we can host, I guess, multiple versions of the word list. The thing that was hard to me about that pull request is like having 4 terms, is small. So it's like, I don't see the big deal about like what the value is with it being hosted by I versus in his own repo, with the tool. But I don't see, I think it's unlikely that we're going to come up with a spec that's going to work for everybody.
For everyone,
And
yeah.
that doesn't seem even like a super awesome use of time.
And that's kind of where I was at. If it's a matter of like, this is your ini.json, and you make sure it stays up to date with whatever recommendations that we come up with, that's one thing. And that also like moves the burden towards the project who's maintaining their spec.
But like we could say, hey, this thing that was the pull request that was made, fine, that's just a JSON list of the words that we've already said we're working on, and we can agree to keep that up to date on our side. And then, I mean, other tools could probably easily just adopt that, or I don't know. I mean, it's not, again, it's like, it's not a big deal if he has to just host it on his own site, but it's also not a big deal if we say, if you want this in JSON, here's a list of it in JSON.
It is ish, because I feel like if it's the only tool that we're dropping a spec in for, it's a show of support.
Yeah, but it's like such a, I mean,
It's
like,
small.
it's not
It's
like a
small.
whole involved, it's like a real, but yeah.
So
Is
so
there
this
any
went,
way we could reduce that concern of a show of support by dropping in more than one tool in quick succession? Like, it's not necessarily hard to spin up these specs for self-sec enough, because the existing word list is so small. The burden of starting up those specs is fairly small, and adding to them incrementally over time is a little easier than like starting up a spec for like 20 terms all at once.
so this is where we started talking about having a separate specs repo. But at the same time, like if you take something like Woke, right? Woke, it like has their suggestions listed alongside the code, right? So like for Woke to ingest our suggestions, they would have to do work on their side. So the argument becomes like, does it make sense for them to do work in 2 places when their word lists could just be in 1 place?
I guess the question that I'm looking for is, we've been talking about this for 2 or 3 meetings now, and I'm interested to see what the action item is that actually moves this forward.
Moves what forward?
Moves this entire conversation, basically.
The
like, are
DCI
we
lint part of the conversation?
no, but are the part of, are we going to support a centralized spec that we own and that we ask others to consume? Or are we going to support specs for multiple tools?
I think that if we eventually have a spec, that's fine. And we have something written down that is spec-like, it's just not in code, right?
Okay.
Is it in, it's in org, right?
We have a recommendation template, which is not a spec.
That's what I'm saying. It's not a spec.
Mm-hmm.
It's language.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
So
so
we
a
have-
few questions from Dale in the chat. One is, are we going to support a centralized spec that we create, or are we going to support multiple specs from different sources? So that, yeah, this is what we're
I'm capturing what we're saying because you guys say a lot of things and I want to make sure that I can see it.
Do you
as-
have the, are you on the notes? Would you mind dropping it into the notes?
Yeah, I
So
can drop into the notes. Yeah. Okay.
So
And then I had a user story 3 because I heard 2 stories and then there was a lot of dialogue. I think the 3rd story may be related to this, to the maintenance of the spec, which I see is separate from user story 1 and 2 that I captured in a very, very briefly, right? Based on what you were saying.
okay, so user story 1, I'm just reading out for the recording. I have a tool I am currently using and I want to scan for non-inclusive language, and user story 2 is INI creates and maintains JSON list of terms that INI has approved. User story 3, question mark. So yeah, so my worry here is acquiring the maintenance burden of integration between multiple tools. Is that a thing that we are interested in doing at this moment?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that doesn't sound good.
Yeah, that's what I was feeling too.
So I hate to really be a bit of a stick in the mud today. I apologize for asking these questions, but if we're going to say no, we don't want to maintain specs for a bunch of different tools. My question is, what does this
What do we want to do?
Well, yeah, what does this work stream maintain? And that's the question that I'm trying to drive at, is like, what action is this particular group of people taking? Because I think if the question is we don't know what action we're taking, then is this a useful use of everybody's time?
Well, here's something that I think would be valuable. Like we're collecting suggestions of tools that we're gonna record demos of, and we're going to have a place where we can point people to a set of tools that you know, where there's some information. Well, one thing we can do is that we can take a look at this initial set of tools and we can talk to the projects about, we can basically say, if there was going to be one spec, that one format that we're going to maintain, a machine readable format of the terms, I think that would be fine. You know, that here's the terms in plain English, here's a machine readable format, and we're maintaining that. So if we talk to a couple of these projects and said, can you just consume, does one of the formats that one of the projects already uses, or look good? I bet you it would be minimal. Like I'm looking at the woke one here, and it's YAML.
It's YAML, yeah.
So everyone loves YAML, right? So as long as it's not XML, I think that I'm sure.
Yeah.
But basically, that's something constructive that we could do, because we're already gathering together some different projects and getting some information about them to share with people, and we can also maybe push a little bit of standardization, because if it was one list that we were maintaining, that would seem fine and constructive, but maintaining lots of different little bespoke ones seems like not a good use of time.
Yeah, so I think we were moving in that direction as of last call, and part of like adding the template for demos was like adding the template for demos was part of this, so we could get more information about tools and what they looked like. A useful bit of time spent would be getting the recommendations and then actually being able to slice and dice them, whether it's like whether they live in YAML. Like an example would be the sigs.yaml in Kubernetes community, right? You take the SIGs, like if you're going to make an update to the community repo that's related to one of the SIG subprojects, yada, 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 you make an update to the sigs.yaml, and then you run a generator tool, and it spits out markdown, right? So if we're storing our recommendations, maybe we store them in YAML, we run a generator tool, it spits out the canonical lists and markdown, right? As well as you can also pull from the YAML. right? We can also write a converter, or we can do this and that flips it to JSON, or we can do this in QLang so that you can validate against the specs once they get spit out. Like there are a bunch of different options, but like all I'm saying is we should not do multiple options, and we should go with the one that seems best formed based on tools that we have reviewed in these demos. So I think part of this is we get demos on the books, and there are probably people who are already interested in giving demos. Caitlin, who is the maintainer for Woke, commented on our list, and I have an action to reach out to her because I'm also going to discuss. I will keep that off recording in the meantime, but we can do the same with DCI lint. We can do the same with, Karthik has a GitHub action as well. So like demos, find fit, tweak, create spec.
And collect use cases so we understand that the specs we're creating meets the needs of the community we're serving.
Intended users, exactly.
So
Absolutely.
use cases, schedule demos, capture the tools list that we're demoing, and features of them. And that way we can then, combine that with the specs and also identify gaps, right? For where there is white space to be addressed. Celeste, does that address your concerns about how we move this forward?
I was actually just going to write that down in the notes. Could you read out the order of operations you just read? Or you just said?
Schedule demos.
Sorry.
And some of these can happen in parallel. I think I can edit as well. Let me see. I'm testing whether you gave me access with the new ID I gave you. Sorry with the ID messes
okay.
with me, but it's my life right now. Okay, I'm typing schedule demos of existing tools. Are you seeing it?
Yep.
Am I writing in the right
Yep.
place?
Where?
Or wait, or where I'm seeing
I'm in the
Celeste.
wrong place. Hang on. Okay. It is. Okay, here we go. Okay. I would put use cases as a sub, or you want to do it as a flow? Okay.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand like the order of operations here.
I would put maybe, okay. I wanted to capture, provide use case and user story templates in parallel with the scheduling of the demos.
Yeah, these can for sure happen in parallel.
How do you want to show it's parallel processing?
You know what? Let's just kind of get it all down.
Let's just
now.
dump it out and then we'll figure. I guess and then figure out flow.
Okay, I'm typing the provide user templates and user stories. Did we already ask people to submit their request for demos? Because if not, that would be a prereq step to scheduling the demos.
Yeah, we need.
Yeah, we should announce.
Create a sign up for demos. I think we had talked about that, right?
Yeah, Celeste created a template in GitHub, but we should plug it.
Okay.
Yeah, I have not plugged it. And this will be my action item for today. All right, and then use data collected from templates from stories, use cases, and demos to generate specs and ID gaps. Does that work? Yep.
I think this is use case templates. Sorry. All right. And do we want to assign owners to these things, or just want to capture it for now?
Let's assign owners. So I'll submit or kind of advertise around to get people to do demos. I see Dale is gonna take on the use case and user stories bit.
I
and
can
really-
work on specs.
Sure.
I'm planning to reach out to Caitlin as well about Woke. So
Okay. Okay. Aside from that, there's a pull request that needs to be reviewed, but I think that's more of a language thing, so I'll take that to the language work stream. This meeting is now closer to 45 minutes long, so we still have 15 minutes left.
Unfortunately, I have hard stop today, but just today. I know you were gonna do this. I know. As soon as it happened, I got the books at the bottom of the hour. I usually am free there.
Okay.
okay.
Is there anything else we need to talk about?
One quick question before I drop: are we going to try to schedule the demos as part of these meetings, or I thought we were going to try to get them done, faster than every 2 weeks?
I think it'll be the general meeting.
No, we want to do it here because
No,
that's part of
here.
the scope of this meeting.
Okay, but will we add an additional meeting so we can get, because I think there's quite a few to demo, or do you don't
if-
think, yeah. tell
I
me.
think based on based on people's availability, right? Like
Okay,
if we're able to, because if we have enough for a full meeting, there's no reason we couldn't stack 3 15-minute demos together.
okay.
Right.
All right, so I think we need somewhere up here in planning, decide on frequency of demo meetings and adjust as needed.
Yeah.
All right, okay, I'm gonna drop, sorry about that.
No problem.
Later, Dale.
Bye.
Is that all she wrote for the day?
I think that is. We hit the bottom of the agenda. Are there things that people want to cover? Anyone that wants to introduce themselves that hasn't had a chance to yet?
I don't know if I've exactly introduced myself. I'm basically lurking here because I think this is a good idea, but I'm getting to retire. I'm getting ready to retire from Penn State, and I don't want to push myself into anything else. So I'm hoping that by the time I retire, there'll be something that I can put together and say, y'all ought to consider this.
I love it. I love it. Well, we are here to help how we can. And welcome, Donald.
Welcome indeed.
Just a quick note from Peter. I'm the author of that pull request about the specs. And I just wanted to reiterate that I'm more than happy to change that pull request to make it a generic one so that it does not have any mention of the specific tool where I'm coming from, because it doesn't make a difference to me. I'm not really seeking any sort of endorsements. I just want the spec to be hosted in the INI because that's the added value for me as a tool author, that I have a place, a centralized authority that the INI is to use for my tool. And then the tool focuses on the technology and the INI maintains the word list itself.
Okay, perfect. So would you mind actually commenting to that effect on, I guess, issue 71?
Oh yeah, I can.
That would
So
be-
is it better to have that discussion on the issue or the Slack? Because
It's more so that we capture your use case on the issue, right? So we can reference that when other people like, that's me too, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Issue 71.
Yep. And I linked it in the Zoom chat.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
All right. If that's it, I'm going to call the meeting. I'm going to call it 3, 2, 1. Stopping the recording.